Did you know that a snowy owl can fly so quietly that a mouse won't hear the rush of its wings until it's too late? Quieter than a human whisper at arm's length? In this video, we follow Saga, a snowy owl born on a wind-drawn plain where the sky is a room without walls. In this story, Saga will learn why faraway skies suddenly fill with northern ghosts, arrivals so many at once and so far from home that one winter she may ride among them. She will learn to hear dinner under the snow she cannot see through, listening with her whole face until the white gives up a whisper. She will hurry from fluff to a first silent flight in a summer short enough to count in sunsets. And when the land asks her to roam, she will follow a map without roads, reading wind and light to find her way. But what tells a young owl when to leave a place that fed her yesterday? And among all that open white, how does she choose where to stop and where to stay? We'll be with Saga for the first blink into cold air, the hop that almost holds, the tries that miss, and the try that doesn't. We'll move through her first blizzard and stand in its quiet afterward. We'll cross wide places when prey thins, and return with the long light to a chosen rise, a calm partner, and the round promise of new eggs. Settle in. Let the wind be low and the night be kind. When you're ready, we'll begin with Saga's first breath. Welcome to Boring Animals for Sleep. Soft storytelling and true facts, so your mind learns while your body rests. The wind moves like a slow breath over a plain of pale grass and old snow. Beneath a shallow rise, where the ground is only slightly higher than the world around it, warmth gathers in a bowl of feathers. A shell thins. A heartbeat answers. And Saga, not yet named by anything but light, pushes against the small round door of her beginning. Her mother settles deeper, making the sky disappear. Outside, the land is a room without walls. Inside, there is only heat and a soft, steady sound. The first break is a thread-fine line, then another. The world presses inward and opens at the same time. Saga's face meets air. The light is big and the shapes are close. The down of a breast, the edge of a wing, the hushed call that means stay. Far away, a white shape on the horizon lifts and drops. Her father, carrying the day's proof that the ground is alive beneath its cover. In seasons like this, food seems simple. In other seasons, the same ground will be quiet. For now, the rhythm is enough. Arrive, share, rest. Saga drifts between warmth and waking. The sky is still a rumor beyond the curve of her nest. Somewhere in that bright distance, a path is already being written for her, one that will carry her past this rise and into places where the wind is stronger and the light does not end. But not yet. For this moment, the world is measured in feathers and breath, and everything she needs is close. The plain is a white thought that never quite ends, a page the wind keeps turning. In the shallow rise where Saga hatched, the nest is little more than pressed grass and patience, a warm hollow in a country of breath. Her mother sits broad and calm, a circle of shelter that moves only when the light changes or the smallest sound asks for notice. When she lifts to stretch, the world is briefly enormous. When she settles again, the world is exactly the size of Saga's heartbeat. Hunger and comfort trade places like quiet partners. The pattern is old, her father's low pass over the horizon, a pale body against pale air, then the close work of feeding. Sometimes he comes heavy with prey, and the nest feels rich. Sometimes he is only wind, and a promise that tries its best to hold. Saga learns the shape of waiting. Waiting has sounds. The whistle of far wings, the shiver of grass, the little talk her mother makes that means I'm here. Stay still, you are seen. Sight arrives in steps. At first the world is softness and light. Then edges visit. Fringe of a feather, the dark moon of an eye, the tiny thorns of her own growing feet. She tests what's hers, the grip that wants to be stronger, the neck that wishes to turn farther than it can, the beak that clacks in a small, surprised way when a shadow touches the ground just beyond the nest. A sibling leans against her like a second warmth. On easy days, the two of them are a pile of breathing. On leaner days, space appears between them that isn't quite sleep. The open country teaches without speaking. There are no branches to cradle a lesson, no walls to hide practice. Everything is out loud. Saga watches her mother tilt to the wind so that feathers lie smooth, watches the slow swivel of a head towards something she cannot yet name, and feels, without words, that the line from eye to ear to ground is a kind of path. Sometimes the air itself points. Sometimes nothing points at all, and that is also an answer. A gust combs the nest. Saga presses lower, but curiosity is a rising thing. She pushes up against the weight of comfort, stands on feet that will someday take her farther than the horizon looks, and wobbles. The top of the nest rim is a border and a dare. She puts one foot there, just one, and then both, and the plane finds her with its size. The first view is almost too big to hold. Sound becomes direction. Light becomes distance. The wind has texture, a woven hush that moves around her face and through her down, as if it carries messages folded thin. Her father returns with a clean arc that skims the ground and lifts. Food is quick work, a neat, precise sharing, a lullaby made of chewing and tiny clicks. After, her mother breathes heavier, not tired, measured. Saga is fed and fed again. Strength happens slowly and then quickly, like ice melting under a quiet sun. She learns that warmth uses energy, and that energy must be found and carried from a world that looks empty until it isn't. On a day when returns are far apart, her mother leaves for a short loop and comes back with the same careful look, the same low call that draws the nest tighter around its small living center. Saga learns that absence can be a method of care. Practice begins with failures so small they barely count. The hop that isn't, the balance that almost is, the wing that opens a fraction too late to matter, and a fraction early enough to mean tomorrow. When she lifts both wings together, the air changes its mind about her. It recognizes something, not flight yet, but the idea of flight dressed in patience. She holds that idea in her chest. It makes her breath move differently, as if the wind outside has been handed a key to a door inside. The plane's voices keep teaching. A fox barks far off, a single bead of sound on a string so long it vanishes at the knot. A distant gull laughs at nothing Saga can see. Somewhere under the snow, something tunnels with a sound like a pencil under paper. Saga does not know the word under, but her face collects the knowledge anyway, drawing faint lines from one ear to the other, curving them toward the ground. When her mother listens, her whole face listens. When her mother moves, it is in angles that make sense even to a chick who cannot follow them yet. Saga notes the angle as if it were a star. Evening, if this land can be said to have evening, blues the plain. The sun refuses to set the way other suns do. Shadows are suggestions. Time is a long, pale ribbon. Saga sleeps in sections, wakes in sections, grows in sections. She learns that the day will not always be generous. and that the body must be anyway. On a hard morning, frost freckles the nest rim and the air tastes like stone. Her mother stands to turn the eggs, to tuck heat where heat is needed, to look out over everything with a gaze that weighs distance for meaning. Saga rests her beak against her sibling's back and finds that the smallest steady thing in the world can be another breathing creature. The first time, a gust tries to take her balance with intent. It arrives sideways, not cruel, just certain. Saga leans into it, the way she has seen her mother lean. The wind holds her up and pushes her down in the same motion. She discovers the small math of it, how much to give, how much to keep, and steadies in the way birds steady, with stillness that looks like grace from a distance. What tells a young owl when to leave a place that fed her yesterday? Is it the length between returns, the angle of light on the ground, the sound of tunnels under the snow? She does not have the answer yet, but the question lives comfortably in her, a quiet lantern hung from a beam she is still building. For now, the beam is the nest rim, and the lantern is the way her mother's shadow falls across it at noon. Another day, and then another. The first hop that clears the rim is not flight, but it is not nothing. She lands with both feet, and a small, surprised sound that is half courage, half apology to the ground. Her mother allows it. Her father sees and writes a brief note in the air with the line his wings draw as he passes. The note says, "Soon." Clouds gather on the far side of the plain. They do not hurry. The wind tests the edges of the nest and finds them sound. There will be weather. There is always weather. And Saga will meet it with new feathers and an old instinct that knows how low to sit and how long to wait. Before that, there will be more practice, more leaning, more listening. She will feel the map inside her, adding a small mark called edge, another called above, another called almost. When the next return comes, it is steady and certain. Feeding is careful, unremarkable, perfect. Saga feels the plain make room for a future afternoon, when she will stand on this same rim, look out at the same unpromising distance, and find what the distance is hiding. Not yet. The nest is still large enough to hold all of her, but the wind knows her name now, not the sound of it, the shape. And when it moves across her face, it moves as if greeting someone who will soon meet it halfway. She settles, heavier and lighter than yesterday. Her sibling breathes against her. The plain waits without impatience. The sky is a room without walls, but the room has corners if you know where to look. Saga is learning where they are, and when she closes her eyes, the wind keeps reading to her, a slow story about how to stand, how to hear, and how to rise when it is time. The nest rim becomes a habit, then a classroom. Saga stands there at different hours to learn how the world changes its face. Morning carries a thin, glassy brightness. Noon flattens everything into a single, wide thought. Late light turns the ground into a slow river of pale gold. Each version of the plain teaches a new rule about how to be small when you must be small, and still when stillness is smarter than strength. Her mother is the best quiet teacher. She does not deliver instructions. She creates examples and holds them until the air understands. When wind presses from the north, she leans a fraction and the pressure loses interest. When the light stares too directly, she lowers her head and becomes exactly as tall as the grass will allow. When nothing moves, she becomes nothing. Saga studies those moments most because becoming nothing feels like a trick that could open a door she cannot yet see. The work of listening begins with her face. Sound doesn't arrive as a noise, it arrives as a shape. A far trill shaves one edge of the world. A buried rustle rounds a corner that isn't there. Saga feels those shapes slide along the circle of her face until 2 points agree. Her head turns and the ground earns a coordinate only she can read. It is not magic. It is practice joined to something older than practice. A design written into feathers and bone. Hunger stays close, not unkind, only persuasive. It keeps the lessons honest. When her father returns often, Saga studies slower and sleeps more. When returns grow thin, the plane gets sharper and every angle matters. She feels a new clock start to tick, the one that measures distance between tries. It does not scold. It simply suggests that the next try should be better than the last. That suggestion becomes a promise she wants to keep. She learns to name distances without numbers. A shadow releases from a cloud and drifts across the ground, too big to matter. A tiny stitch in the grass, probably wind. Another stitch, but the stitch arrives again, where a stitch should not repeat if it were only air. Saga marks that place with her eyes and waits long enough to hear the quiet insist again. She tells herself in the language of breath, here. The first serious hop from the rim lands short and perfect. The second hop is less perfect and more useful. She slips a little and learns what her talons need from the ground. The third hop surprises her with a soft gust under one wing that lifts and tilts. She frees the other wing to match it, not wide, just enough to turn falling into placing. The nest, generous as always, forgives. Almost, the wind says, as if it knew the word before she did. A day arrives with a clean horizon and exactly the right amount of wind, present but mannerly. Saga chooses a low mound just beyond the nest, a perch that is mostly suggestion. Her mother watches from a short distance, not guarding, not gone. Saga feels taller by the width of a small idea, the idea that the ground can hold her decisions. Standing there, she tries being a shape the plane will not argue with. She narrows, lowers, leans. The air softens around her, uninterested in pushing. She thinks, so that is one answer. Questions continue to arrive, the valuable kind that do not solve themselves. What tells a young owl when to leave a place that fed her yesterday? Among all this white, how do you choose where to stop and where to stay? The questions do not demand, they encourage. They are like the wind's hand at her back, a touch that suggests one more ridge without hurry. Her father loops in from the east, wing beats low and certain. He does not come straight to the nest. He slows and hovers a breath length above the ground, eyes pointing at a spot Saga would have missed yesterday. No pounce, just a pause and a pass, and then he is high again, the lesson folded into the air behind him. Saga files it where she keeps the angle of her mother's head and the taste of frost. She practices not moving, It is harder than moving. Not moving asks her to balance on a thread that the wind keeps humming. She lets the hum run through her instead of against her. After a while, the thread belongs to her. When a tiny sound happens under snow, something like a fingertip writing a secret, Saga feels the thread vibrate with purpose. She does not pounce. Not yet. She is not ready to fail in a way that teaches the wrong thing. She lets the secret continue and marks the place in her mind with a small flag called Later Light Drifts. The sun pretends to set and then thinks better of it. Shadows arrive as polite guests and leave before the room can change. Saga returns to the nest, not because she needs to, but because together is still the smartest word she knows. Her sibling is a warm comma. Her mother is the grammar of the whole sentence. Her father arrives with a clean success. Feeding is careful and precise. The taste reminds Saga that listening is not a story about patience for the sake of patience. It is a story about dinner. And dinner, the plane keeps reminding her, belongs to those who learn to be certain before they leap. A wind change arrives like a new teacher. It smooths the grass in one direction, then combs it back with the back of its hand. Saga holds her shape against the push and notices how the sound shifts when she lowers her body by the height of a feather. The world gets quieter, but the important noises get clearer, as if the plane has agreed to whisper only the names that matter. She experiments with small. Small is not weakness. Small is strategy. From the low mound, she becomes a shorter line, then no line at all. The wind loses interest. A snow flea hops in a meaningless parabola. A winged shadow passes, gull too high to be relevant. Somewhere under the crust, a pencil of motion writes 3 short dashes, stops, then writes 1 long line. Saga lets the dashes echo inside the circle of her face. 2 points agree. Her head turns. For a heartbeat, she imagines herself falling into that agreement, like a stone into a clear pool. Not yet. She breathes once, marks the spot with a quiet "there," and lets the moment close without using it. She is building a drawer labeled tomorrow. Her mother offers another lesson by doing nothing at all. Nothing, but done completely. She settles, becomes grass, becomes snow, becomes a thought. The wind is too busy to read. When the world blinks, she is still there, exactly as before. Saga studies the exactness. Be the same on the next breath, she tells herself, and holds. Her legs complain and then grow quiet. Her wings itch to adjust and then are persuaded not to. A tiny shiver wants to climb her back and go looking for attention. She does not let it climb. The thread she balances upon hums less, then not at all. Now the ground speaks. The undersnow pencil writes again. This time the line is more certain than the dashes. Later, Saga promises, but soon. Hunger leans in to ask its honest question. Is soon now? The question is pointed, but not cruel. She answers with a trial. From stillness, she eases a foot forward. The mound does not argue. She lowers her head until one eye is exactly level with the plane. The horizon rises in sympathy and gives her a longer ruler with which to measure motion. Another pencil mark. Another. The 2 marks rhyme. She feels the rhyme land in a place behind her eyes that has been empty until this minute. Her father passes again, not to feed, but to underline. He skims, pauses, cants his head at an angle Saga has not yet tried, and then rides the wind away. The angle feels like a key. She tries it. The undersnow sound changes from somewhere to there, then from there to there, right now. A single breath later, the world distracts her with a careless gust, and the clarity fades. She does not chase it. She waits until her own breath draws the focus back. Come to me, not the other way, she whispers to the plane, and the plane, surprisingly, listens. Practice is a path paved with almosts. Saga makes one small, deliberate hop and lands where the grass tells her to land. The snow holds. The hidden pencil goes quiet. For a heartbeat, she is sure she has ruined it. Then the pencil writes again, bolder. She feels the two soft circles of her ear openings gather that line and fold it inward, a gift handed to the center of her skull. Her feet reset without thought. Closer, the wind suggests, and she obeys by not moving at all. There is a right kind of failure and a wrong kind of failure. The right kind gives you a map. The wrong kind gives you noise. Saga decides she will not leap until the map has at least 2 landmarks. She waits for the second landmark and is rewarded. A stop, then a start, then a stop that isn't quite stopped. Breathing, she realizes, not with words, but with understanding. The animal below breathes. Breath has rhythm. Rhythm can be counted, and counts can be used. She rehearses the count without committing. 1, 2, now, she tells herself, then does not go on, now. She tries it again. 1, 2, now. And still she honors the promise she made to choose certainty over hunger. By the third rehearsal, her body has learned the shape of the motion she has not yet made. Learning happens even when action is paused. When she finally uncurls her legs for a small test, the world accepts the test as if it had been waiting for it. She lands exactly where the count predicted, and the crust holds. She does not break through. She does not pounce. She nods to the ground. Soon, and returns to the mound with the count folded neatly under her breast. Light slides down the sky and then up again. The day performs its long trick. Saga returns to the nest to be part of the sentence that reads, together. Her sibling presses a warm, sleep-shaped syllable into her side. Her mother straightens, then shelters. Her father circles once and drops with the easy certainty of a sentence that already knows its last word. He does not land in the nest. He lands where the crust is thin and stands still as a stake in ice. Saga notes the angle of his head, the set of his shoulders, how the wind slides past without argument. 3 breaths. Nothing. On the 4th, his toes flex. Waiting is also action. Then he lifts, glides. Saga lets the lesson settle. Strength can look like stillness. Certainty can sound like a single breath held until the world answers. Hunger taps again, polite but insistent. She answers it by counting. 1, 2, now, and does not move. 1, 2, now, and still she does not. She listens for the other clock. the undersnow rhythm that makes a line and then a pause and then a line again. When the 2 counts rhyme, she will go. A breeze freshens from the west, faintly salted, a road she has not yet walked. The mound gives her a clean view of a hollow just beyond the nest. She lowers until her breast feathers meet the crust and quiet her outline. Another pencil stroke happens. Another. The marks land in the same small patch of ice. Saga narrows the world to that country. Here, she breathes. Not yet a pounce, only a measure. She glides 1 step forward in a way that is almost not a step. The crust holds. Her weight becomes a question the snow cannot quite hear. The line below shifts. The rhythm she has been trying to learn finds her and speaks with confidence. Now. She does not take the invitation. She lets it repeat to be certain. It repeats. She rises a hand's width, opens her wings only as wide as the wind will allow, and lets gravity think she is falling. The fall becomes a place. Her feet find the seam where air becomes snow. She does not strike. She listens again. The breath below comes and goes. She marks the go and waits for the come. When it comes, she chooses the next part of the story. Not a full dive. Not yet. Only a short, precise press that says, I know you. The snow replies by holding its silence. The pencil line blurs. It is enough. It teaches the snow what her weight feels like, and teaches her what truth feels like under ice. She steps back, smooth, unspectacular, correct. Behind her, the nest is approval. Ahead, the plain is a blackboard that keeps patient writing. Her father returns with the day's sure answer. The sharing is steady and exact. Between mouthfuls, Saga keeps 1 ear on the nest and 1 on the hollow. She is learning to be 2 kinds of awake at once. She files the taste under reasons to listen well, then cleans her beak against the rim and lets comfort have its turn. Cloud shoulders gather on the far horizon, a slow thought building. The wind makes a new promise in her feathers. Weather is coming, and weather brings its own lessons. Saga studies the shape of the clouds, the color in their underbellies, and the way her mother settles a little deeper as the light dulls. Her sibling is warm against her side, a small certainty in a world of questions. Evening takes a long time to arrive, and never fully does. The plain grows blue, then less blue, then thinks about brightness again. Saga visits the mound 1 last time. The hollow waits. The rhythm under snow is faint but faithful. She rehearses the count and does not use it. Soon, she tells herself, soon can be wise. On the way back, she pauses at the rim to practice being less than notice. She narrows, lowers, becomes a line, then becomes nothing the wind can hold. For 3 breaths, the world forgets she is there. On the 4th, she remembers herself and steps into the nest. Together is still the smartest word. Her mother's wing is a roof. Her father is a quiet border drawn just beyond sight. Saga exhales the remainder of the day and feels the map inside her add 2 new marks. There right now, and wait again. The summer is short. The questions are close. The wind speaks her name without urgency, as if it knows that readiness is already happening. What remains unsolved hums like a thread drawn through cloth. hearing through snow well enough to be sure, turning almost into now, choosing the first road without roads. Those answers are coming with the weather. In the distance, the slow thought of cloud becomes a decision, and the plane prepares to teach in a new language. Saga closes her eyes. The wind reads on. Morning arrives as a pale hush, the crust shining like a held breath. Saga climbs to the low mound and lets the wind decide her outline. Today it chooses small. She becomes a line no taller than the grass, a question the plane can barely hear. Under the snow, a world writes itself. Tunnels braid in the cold, little roads with ceilings warmed by the lives that use them. Saga cannot see any of this. She does not need to. Sound and pressure make a map. The eyes would only complicate. She listens with the circle of her face until two faint hints agree, then waits for the third that turns agreement into proof. A tiny dash, a longer line, a pause. The pattern repeats. Saga lowers her body until her breast feathers whisper against the crust. The whisper reminds her to keep the same shape for one more breath. The world answers by keeping its own rhythm. She rehearses the count she learned yesterday. 1, 2, now, and holds. 1, 2, now, and holds again. The second clock, the under-snow breath, must rhyme with the first. When they match, the pounce will belong to certainty and not to wish. Hunger waits, respectful. Her father appears at the horizon, glides low, vanishes behind a ripple of land. A shadow crosses, gull again, too remote to matter. If she is patient in the right way, the plane will let her touch what she cannot see. The rhyme arrives. Saga rises the height of a hand, opens her wings only to steer, and lets gravity begin the story. The press is short, precise, quiet as a held word. Snow gives. Her toes meet the seam and hold. For a heartbeat, the world becomes still enough to hear her own breath answer the breath below. The stillness breaks. She lifts with a twist, carrying the small proof of her listening. She does not celebrate loudly. She steps to the mound and arranges herself into calm again. Her mother watches without moving. Her father is a white dash far off. They're not there at all. Saga eats carefully. What matters most is not the catch, but the route. Angle, count, patience, release. She files the sequence where it will be waiting the next time the ground pretends to be empty. Cloud shoulders gather in the west. The wind's edge grows grainy and cold. The plain loses a little color. Weather is writing toward them. Saga studies the changing grammar, how gusts arrive in sets, how the air tastes of distant ice, how sound thins. A second lesson. Sometimes the snow keeps its secrets on purpose. A tunnel collapses somewhere away from her, and the map goes wrong for a moment. Saga resists the urge to fix a map that is still being drawn. She returns to first principles. Make the smallest true shape. Wait for 2 hints. Test with the count. Commit when the story repeats. She misses once, cleanly. The crust holds, the tunnel veers. The breath below is not where the math said it would be. She steps back and lets the error become instruction. The next attempt is not a pounce, but a listen first. A new pattern reveals itself, short, short, long. And she realizes the floor below is layered here, a ceiling over a second ceiling. The answer is to come at the seam from a different angle. She does, and the ground accepts. By afternoon, the wind blows letters across the plain too quickly to read it all. Saga practices less height, less outline, less argument with the air. When she gets it right, gusts pour over her like water over stone. When she gets it wrong, the wind writes her name in the grass. She erases it by becoming still. What tells you when to leave a place that fed you yesterday? The chapter's question returns, useful as ever. Saga looks at the sky's handwriting, and here's the answer starting. Go when the map changes faster than you can update it, when listening turns into guessing, when the air asks you to learn a wider room. Evening takes a long blue breath. Saga returns to the nest, where warmth is still a circle and together still the smartest word. She shares, rests, and watches the clouds finish their thought. The plane goes quiet in that special way before weather, soundless but speaking. Tomorrow will ask different things of her. She is ready to answer, with count, with angle, with patience, with the smallest true shape and the quiet that makes it visible. At the edge of sleep, the wind lays down a hint she will follow soon. One more ridge, then another, and a new lesson waiting, where the snow hides and tells the truth. The sun forgets to fall. Out here, night is a suggestion and day is a habit. Saga stands on the low mound and studies a lesson that seems too simple. How does a white bird hunt in a world that is also white, with light so steady it leaves no shadows to hide in? The plain offers no forest and no cliff, only distance in every direction. Her mother solves it by becoming less. She lowers, narrows, and lets the wind draw a small, correct shape around her body. From a little way off, she is only the idea of a bird, not the full fact. When she moves, it is slow enough that the plane takes her for a change in the light. Saga copies the angles, head low when the sun stares, body level when the wind pushes, eyes half closed, so the lids do not flash. Camouflage here is not paint, it is behavior. The scattered brown marks in Saga's growing plumage break her outline, but the real trick is pace. Even breath is part of the disguise. She practices breathing in short cloth, tiny folds that do not flutter her chest. The air loses interest. A fox, puzzled by an object that refuses to be interesting, looks elsewhere. In bright country, position matters more than color. If the sun sits left, she places the light on her shoulder, so her head casts no signal. If the wind arrives from the right, she leans until her feathers lie flatter than the grass. If nothing moves, she does not either. The plane begins to forget she is there. Even in light, the world makes small pockets of dark. A hummock throws a soft line. A shallow trough collects a coolness that sound prefers. Saga learns to stand on the edge of those gentle changes, close enough to borrow them, far enough not to announce them. She treats the plane as a page of very light writing and chooses a place where her presence falls between the letters. Hunger keeps her honest. It asks for action. The lesson asks for restraint. She answers with practice that looks like nothing. 3 breaths without argument, then 3 steps that leave no story behind them. She measures the distance a blink travels across her face and waits to move until the blink lives between other things. Her father arrives in a white arc, half sky, half ground. He slows near the nest, then chooses not to land. Instead, he glides toward a low, distant field where mice write small news beneath the crust. Saga follows at a respectful distance, keeping her height even with the grass so the horizon will not redraw her. When he turns into the wind and pauses, she does too. When he sinks a hand's width, she lets the same hand press her down. The field opens like a quiet mouth. Nothing obvious, and therefore perfect. Saga makes herself less than notice, and sets a count inside her chest, not for a pounce, but for the rhythm of the day. 1, to look. 2, to listen. 3, to decide. 4, to do nothing, because nothing is still the right decision. Patience grows a small heat behind her breastbone. She understands she's collecting yes for later. The paradox remains on purpose. Saga can now stand in bright country without offering herself to every eye. But standing is not hunting. The question stays open. In all this daylight, how will she move at the moment that matters without tearing the disguise she has spent the hour weaving? The answer will need a stitch tight enough to hold and loose enough to breathe. Cloud shoulders thicken on the horizon, writing a new chapter in a slower hand. The wind tastes like old ice. The grass learns to bow. Weather is near. Saga lowers until her outline is a rumor and lets the first grit pass over her feathers. She feels the map inside her mark, a place called shelter and another called later. She returns to the nest to become together again. Canal. Her sibling presses a warm comma into her side. Her mother folds the sentence closed. Her father brings the day's sure answer and leaves the rest for study. Saga keeps the paradox where it belongs. Open, useful, a door not yet walked through. At the rim, she breathes the day backward. Decide, listen, look, then stillness, as if folding the lesson for travel. Almost there, the wind hums. One more ridge. In the long light that refuses to end, Saga lets readiness be enough for now, knowing the next page will ask for motion and that a storm is coming to teach what stillness cannot. Cloud shoulders thicken. The horizon wears a low grey crown. The wind speaks in short, then long syllables, and each asks Saga to answer with balance. She climbs to the mound, narrows, and lets a stronger gust try to move her. She gives one feather's width, then takes it back. Gusts are teachers, soft ones for leaning, hard ones for staying. Saga learns to keep her chest level while her wings tilt, to turn a push into a glide that ends where she began. She practices the rhythm: up, hold, down, hold. Her body is changing to meet its promise. Down gives way to sturdier feathers. Mottled browns break the outline. The long primaries learn to whisper less when they work. Warmth is now something she manages. When the wind steals heat, she tucks for a count and then stands again. When the sun flatters, she opens a fraction to let excess go. She practices edges: edge of nest, edge of mound, edge of a low hummock that pretends to be a cliff. From the nest, the ground wants to catch her. From the mound, the ground is neutral. From the hummock, the ground begins to feel like distance. She hops, places, breathes, and returns. The hop becomes a float. She gives the moment back and tries again. Her father chooses a wind with manners and draws a line through it. He does not demonstrate a dive. He demonstrates a beginning, a lift without hurry, a slow face into the breeze, a pause that invites the air to do its share. Saga copies only the first half of his sentence. The second half belongs to later. Hunger nudges, the honest partner that keeps practice interested. She answers with listening, because listening makes the next meal less expensive. Under the snow, the pencil of life keeps writing. Today is for wind work. The Pounce count rests while balance grows fluent. The daylight paradox stays open. How to move without tearing the disguise. Saga experiments with pace. She learns that slow is not one speed, but a family. Slow for wind, slow for light, slow for eyes that notice motion before color. She times steps to live inside a blink's forgetfulness. The plane obliges by looking elsewhere. Afternoon turns metallic. Gusts arrive in sets. 3, then 5, then 3. Saga climbs the hummock and faces the breeze head-on. She opens her wings to a careful angle, not wide. The air climbs the curve of her back, pours over the trailing edge, and lets her hang for a heartbeat on nothing. She finds the point where lift begins, then leaves at once, so she will want to return. A line of snow lifts far off, as if the ground exhaled. Dusting, not yet a storm. Her mother moves lower on the nest, smooth and heavy as good advice. She files a note. When weather writes louder, lower is often right. A fox prints tidy punctuation at the field's edge. Saga reads the sentence, then dismisses it as not hers today. A gull drifts, indifferent. The horizon reduces to simple ideas. She tries a longer float where the ground is briefly optional. She lands where she meant to, a small apology in her toes that the earth seems happy to accept. She returns to the mound and practices not arriving. To move and not arrive is the art of staying unseen. She plots a path that almost reaches a mark, then veers one body length shy, then slips back as if she had never left. The lesson pleases her more than a catch. Shadows thicken in the west. The crown on the horizon lowers into a heavy band. The wind acquires teeth. Saga studies the new shapes of air on her face and feels the chapter tilting toward weather. Even the under-snow pencil writes slower. She returns to together. The nest is warm by design and warmer by use. Her sibling presses close. Her mother is a lid against the draft. Her father patrols the near distance. Saga eats with care, then watches the sky finish. What comes is not hers to stop, only hers to meet with correct shapes. The next page will test what stillness taught and what edges whispered. How to keep heat, keep balance, and let a storm pass without taking her name. Almost there, the wind says. One more ridge, it adds, meaning one lesson before the first blizzard writes its wide, white line. Saga closes her eyes and answers the day the way she has been taught, by staying. The storm will ask for motion soon. For now, readiness is enough. The wind, is a careful teacher today, present but polite. Saga climbs the hummock and lets the air take the first line. She answers with a small opening of her wings, no wider than the confidence she can keep. The ground loosens beneath her just enough to feel like a choice. Practice has a sequence now. Count to breathe, breathe to see to place, place to rise a hand's width, and give the moment back before it becomes bigger than you. She repeats the set until her body knows it as well as hunger knows its own name. Her mother watches with the kind of attention that protects by not interrupting. Her father writes slow sketches in the air, arched pass, soft face into wind, pause, relax, leaving the endings blank on purpose. Saga copies beginnings and returns to standing as if the rest of the sentence were not yet invented. The daylight paradox stays open like a door she is learning to pass without touching. She experiments with pace that is too slow for eyes to argue with, steps that arrive inside a blink, breath that leaves no flutter. When she moves correctly, the plane doesn't notice she moved. When she is careless, the grass writes her name and she erases it with stillness. Edges get taller. The hummock that pretended to be a cliff becomes a better imitation. Saga chooses a start where the wind climbs the slope and spills over in a soft sheet. She opens to that sheet and lets it hold her for a heartbeat longer than yesterday. The landing matters more than the lift. She lands where she meant to, closes, resets, and tries again. Hunger encourages ambition. Wisdom edits it. She keeps today's lesson inside short. Short lift, short float, short return. The undersnow pencil is quiet in this field. Listening can rest while wings learn grammar. A fox appears as a punctuation mark and chooses a way. A gull hangs on a higher line, less curious than the afternoon. The sky loses a little color as the storm's low crown thickens on the horizon. Saga files the new light. The plane is becoming one great soft shadow. She learns the feel of too much angle, and the wind scolds. Too much height, and the landing chooses her. Too much want, and practice turns into noise. She halves everything and finds the sweet, quiet middle where the air lifts without making a promise it cannot keep. Her father drifts near enough for her to see the fine edge of a primary feather. The edge is not blunt. It is broken into tiny steps that turn sound into nothing. Saga matches the angle and listens for her own noise. When she hears any, she changes shape until the air forgets to complain. The hush that results is not the famous silence yet, but it is a road toward it. A longer float tempts her. She answers with, almost. Almost is the right size for today. She opens, slides, closes, stands. Again. The ground accepts her every time with a small forgiveness of grass. Cloud smell thickens. The clean scent of far ice broken into pieces, light enough to travel. Her mother settles deeper on the nest. Her sibling sleeps, a warm comma. Saga tries one more lift, holds it for 2 heartbeats, and returns like a leaf that changed its mind. Not yet, she tells the bright part of herself that wants to leap into something larger. Soon. Questions remain on purpose. In full light, how will she move in the exact breath when motion matters most? When the storm writes its wide white line, how will she keep balance and heat without spending the strength she needs for after? The answers are near, but near is not now. She steps down from the hummock, takes the lower mound, then the nest rim, making each arrival so quiet that even she is almost not sure she arrived. Together is still the smartest word. Sharing is careful, precise. Warmth is a circle that edits the wind down to a whisper. The horizon wears its grey crown without hurry. Almost there, the air suggests. One more ridge. Saga closes her eyes and keeps today's lesson whole. Tomorrow, we'll ask for more motion. Tonight, whether the sun agrees to set or not, readiness is enough. The horizon lowers until it feels close enough to touch. Cloud bellies press down. The light goes pewter. The wind has stopped being polite. It speaks in instructions now, and Saga answers each one with shape. She starts low, body level, head slightly tucked, wings closed but awake. A gust arrives and tries to lift a corner of her. She gives it a feather's width, nothing more, and the gust moves along, surprised to find no purchase. She turns her chest straight into the push and learns how the air divides around her when she is honest about where front is. Honesty helps. Lift is clean, scold is softer. Feathers have jobs. The small face fringe gathers sound. The big primaries trade weight with the wind. The down close to skin keeps a weather of its own. Saga feels the system run. Heat trapped, heat spilled, edges trimmed so the air forgets to make noise. When her wing makes a whisper, she changes its angle until the whisper is a thought instead of a sound. The mound is no longer a school desk. It is a doorway that opens and closes with each gust. She steps through and back in a single breath. Out to be measured by the weather, back to memorize the measurement. The plain smells like metal and snow. Under the crust, the pencil of life writes carefully, fewer dashes, longer rests. Today is not for pouncing. Today is for banking lessons that will spend well tomorrow. Her mother settles deeper on the nest and makes smaller movements that move more meaning. Her father patrols the near distance and chooses pauses the storm cannot argue with. Saga copies the pauses. She learns to rest where the wind spends itself, on the downwind side of a low rise, in the shallow shadow of a hummock. Shelter can be a line no taller than her ankle. The daylight paradox stays open on purpose. In bright weather, you are seen for moving. In this weather, you are seen for moving wrong. The answer must work for both. Saga experiments with a pace that belongs to storms, slower than impatient air, quicker than a restless eye. She lets a gust finish speaking before she takes a step. She lets her step end before the next gust begins. Snow begins. Not much, but meaningful. Grains tick the ground and her face. She lowers without crouching, keeps her outline clean, and discovers that less also means warmer. Heat lost to the wind is heat she would rather save for flying. She practices two truths at once. Keep warm, keep ready. To keep warm, she tucks, smooths, and lets her back become a roof that sheds. To keep ready, she keeps her wings half awake, elbows loose, primaries stacked and listening. The balance is a small fire she tends with attention. A fox moves like a thought along the far edge and is erased by snow. A gull shaves the underside of the cloud and decides elsewhere. The plane has become a room with moving walls. Saga measures how fast those walls travel and decides how much of herself to spend on each minute. The mound gives one last lesson. She climbs, faces the wind, and opens to the first sheet of lift the storm is willing to give. It holds. Not far, not long, but clean. She closes and returns without argument. Again, again. On the fifth try, a scolding curl grabs the edge of her wing and tilts her wrong. She answers by softening. Less angle, less edge, less want. And the curl forgets about her. The lesson is worth more than a catch. Evening happens sideways. The light changes without leaving. Saga eats what the day allows and shares the rest with together. Her sibling is warm punctuation. The nest is grammar that never fails. The storm speaks at a lower pitch now, as if it has more to say. Questions remain as anchors for tomorrow. How do you move in bright country without tearing the disguise you've woven? How do you keep balance and heat when the sky writes in fast white lines? And when the storm is over, where does the road without roads begin? Almost there, the air tells her from the seam between gusts. One more ridge. Saga lets readiness be a shelter no cloud can blow away, and sleeps inside the answer she is building. Morning is pewter and kind. The storm has not arrived, but its handwriting is already on the air. Saga climbs the hummock and stands where the breeze climbs too, a shallow river of moving sky. She opens her wings to almost no further and lets that river push under her until the ground loosens by the width of a thought. Practice now begins before she moves. She arranges herself so the wind sees a shape with no complaints, shoulders level, primaries stepped like fine comb teeth, secondaries overlapping in a quiet shingle, tail a patient rudder. When she makes noise, it is a mistake she corrects by changing angle, not by forcing silence. The air prefers cooperation to apology. Her mother keeps the nest steady, a lid turned just right against the draft. Her father writes short sentences over the field. Lift, pause, settle, ending each one before the weather can edit it. Saga copies the punctuation, not the words. She is not ready for the full sentence yet. Balance turns into grammar. She learns to move her wings without moving her body, then to move her body without asking the wings for help. She tries hinging at the shoulder, while the rest of her is stone. She tries hinging at the wrist, while the shoulder stays honest. When she gets it wrong, the wind scolds gently. When she gets it right, the scold becomes a lift that feels like approval. Below the crust, the pencil of life writes fewer lines. Today is too bright for hunting and too grey for long flights, a day made for the narrow art between, knowing precisely where lift begins and exactly when to give it back. Saga practices starts without middles and middles without ends. She leaves out the landing to imagine it, then lands to honor the imagining. The daylight question hangs where it should in all this openness. How do you move at the exact breath that matters without tearing the disguise you wove all hour? She tests a pace that belongs to light, slower than watching eyes, and a pace that belongs to wind. quick enough to catch the sheet as it forms. Between those paces is a seam she can stand on. She finds it, loses it, finds it again. A fox writes a tidy line across the far field and disappears into a fold of land. Gull and crow trade remarks too high to matter. The horizon lowers another finger. Saga chooses a longer hold, 2 heartbeats, then gives it back. She chooses a longer return. No scrape, no drama. So the ground welcomes her without noticing she left. Her body is almost ready. Wing bones know their distances. The big muscles in her chest learn to push without shouting. She discovers that strength is quieter than she expected. Heat management becomes a skill and not a hope. Open a fraction to spill, close a fraction to keep. Tuck the feet so their tiny shadows don't speak. She practices arriving inside a blink. She chooses a spot, counts a breath, and moves so the step lives entirely within the time a watching eye uses to wet itself. When she gets it right, even she is almost unsure she moved. She smiles in the way birds smile, by holding still afterward. From the nest, her sibling peeks, a warm comma becoming a word. Saga gives a short float that clears the low trough and returns to the mound as if nothing has happened. The wind offers more. She declines, storing the offer on a shelf named later. The sky smells like the first paragraph of snow. Her mother settles deeper. Her father draws a line downwind and stops, as if setting a pin. The storm will have to go around. Saga reads both choices as instructions. Lower when loud, anchor when asked. She lowers, she anchors. What tells a young owl when to leave a place that fed her yesterday? The question is still useful. Maybe you leave when the wind starts speaking a language your field cannot translate. Maybe you leave when the map inside you draws a road that runs past today. She doesn't answer. Not yet. She lets the question ring like a tuning fork that readies the air. A clean sheet of lift arrives, wider than earlier, as if the storm were practicing too. Saga opens, rises to the height of a cautious promise, and hangs there. 1, 2, and returns. Again, again. On the 4th try, the gust grabs the edge of her wing and tilts her off sentence. She edits herself. Less want, more angle, softer wrist. The gust loses interest. Approval returns. She ends before the best attempt, on purpose, so the best attempt can be tomorrow's beginning. The goal is close enough to smell, a first true silent flight that belongs to certainty. Not yet. Almost there. The air hums from the seam between gusts. One more ridge. Saga folds the lesson for travel, steps down to together, and lets readiness keep her warm. Snow begins as a rumor, then a fact. Small grains tick the crust and make the plains sound like paper. The storm is close enough to touch, but not here yet. The wind has a steady hand. Saga climbs the hummock, chooses the face that drinks the breeze, and arranges herself into a shape the air will accept. Everything that came before collects in her body. Count to breathe, breathe to see, see to place, place to rise a hand's width. She adds one new instruction. Keep the hush. If a feather complains, change the angle. if the wind grows teeth, give it less edge to bite. Her mother lowers on the nest heavy and right. Her father stands downwind as a white pin, holding the weather in place. Saga reads them both as blessings. She picks a line where the slope turns the wind into a smooth sheet and waits until that sheet is more invitation than test. She opens. Not wide. Correct. Lift finds her. The ground forgets to hold. For a clean, single heartbeat, she is carried. Another heartbeat, and she is more than carried. She is choosing while the air agrees. Noise. None. The wing steps catch the rush and break it into nothing. The primaries sing the softest version of yes. The first landing should be ordinary. She makes it so. Feet meet crust where she intended. Tail trims the last inch. Wings fold as if they always meant to. The world is exactly where she left it, only closer. She stands and lets her legs learn what triumph feels like when triumph is quiet. Again, she opens a fraction earlier, rides a hand's width higher, holds for 1, 2, gives the moment back before want can make it messy. Again. The next pass is even cleaner. She moves in the daylight without tearing the disguise. The pace belongs to light, and the decision belongs to wind. A fox becomes a pale thought at the field's rim, then chooses a way. A gull scratches the underside of cloud and writes no opinion. Under the snow, the pencil of life is brief and cautious. The storm edits the page. Today, Saga is writing on the air. She tests turning is a sentence with more grammar. She lets the left wing carry, softens the right, and allows the breeze to slide her across the face of lift without stepping off it. The path bends. The hush stays. She returns like a leaf that changed its mind, lands on the mark, and does not spend the victory. She simply keeps it. The daylight riddle remains open by design. This is not the chapter for answers, only proof that answers are possible. She can move in brightness without breaking the cloth she wove from patience. Later, when the sky is gentler, the explanation will arrive. For now, the skill exists, and the skill is enough. Cloud bellies thicken. Snow writes wider strokes. Saga chooses a last pass before the lesson belongs to weather. She opens into the sheet, lifts cleanly, and lets a quiet curve carry her farther than any attempt so far. 1, 2, 3. Return. The landing is the best kind of invisible. Her body keeps the memory without needing the applause of noise. She does not chase a bigger moment. She ends on purpose, so the best can become the beginning of tomorrow. Below the hummock, the nest is warmth and grammar. Together is still the smartest word. She shares, rests, and lets heat mend the small places effort thinned. What comes next is already gathering at the edges of sight, a first blizzard that will test balance, heat, and the map she is building. How do you keep your shape when the world is only movement? Where do you spend strength so that you still have after? Those questions open as cleanly as her wings did, and they stay open on purpose. The storm puts a cold hand on the horizon. Almost there, the air tells her. One more ridge. Saga answers by closing her eyes and keeping the hush she earned today. When the white line draws itself across the plain, she will be ready to read it. The horizon disappears. Cloud becomes ground. Ground becomes sky. Snow is no longer a rumor. Each grain writes fast. Slanted lines across the plain. Saga feels the world move past her as if she were standing in a river. The wind is not angry, only certain. She answers it with shape. Low first. She narrows and lowers until her breast feathers meet the crust and make a small roof that sheds. Tail down a fraction. Head tucked just enough to keep her face fringe free to listen. Wings closed, but awake. A gust tries to lift a corner. She gives it a feather's width, then takes it back. The air respects honesty. Shelter is a craft. There is no tree, no cliff, only land that undulates by a hand's breadth. Saga finds the leeward side of a hummock, where the wind spends itself and leaves a pocket of easier air. Lower is right here. Still is smarter than strong. She tests the pocket with her breath, waits for the gust pattern to repeat. 3, then 5, then 3, and times her rests to live between the sets. Heat is a currency. She keeps it by smoothing feathers tight, by tucking one foot in and then the other, so thin legs trade exposure. The bill disappears into her chest for a count and returns to scan the whiteness. She learns that less can be warmer, and that warmth patiently saved is lift patiently waiting for a better page. The nest remains grammar in the blur. Her mother settles broad and heavy, a lid turned just right. Her sibling presses close, a warm comma that refuses to be blown apart. Her father is a white pin set downwind, a boundary that asks the weather to go around. Saga reads them as instructions. Deepen, anchor, keep the circle whole. Hunger asks its honest question. Now, not now. The undersnow pencil is writing, but the lines break and wander. The crust lies to sound in a storm. She files the promise of later, where she keeps the count. Today's lesson is not about taking. It is about keeping. Keep heat, keep balance, keep the idea of flight safe inside the quiet of her chest. The daylight riddle stays open in the blizzard and grows. In a world made only of movement, how do you keep the disguise you wove from stillness? Saga practices not arriving. She moves one body length to test a new pocket and makes the step live inside a blink of snow. The wind forgets she moved. She lowers, becomes less than notice, waits until the gust finishes saying its piece, then speaks one careful syllable of motion back to it. A fox appears and vanishes, a sentence begun and erased. A gull skims the underside of cloud and chooses a way. The plane shrinks to useful scales. The nest, the hummock, the pocket of easy air, the next breath that matters. Saga measures with her face, not her eyes. The world is close and complete. Gusts punch wrong once, and the pocket collapses. Saga softens, less edge, lower line, head a degree more tucked, and the air spends itself over her instead of through her. The fix is quiet and immediate. She files it under weather grammar, soften first, then decide. Snow piles into thin drifts that crawl like low animals and erase small maps. She redraws the near ground with touch and sound. To test the drift's depth, she leans a feather into it and lets the wind report back. Shallow, too thin to rest in. She chooses another leeward line and finds a pocket that breathes with her. Time stretches. She counts sets of gusts the way she counted for lift. 1, 2, hold. 1, 2, hold. Between sets, she stands to redo the roof of her feathers and bleed a little heat to keep the inside climate truthful. Muscles answer without complaint. Strength is quieter than she thought. Endurance, even more so. Questions open exactly where they should. When the white loosens and the world returns its distances, which way should she move first? What tells a young owl to leave the safety that kept her today and trade it for a wider room tomorrow? And after a storm redraws the plane, how do you know which map survived underneath? Hours fold in a steady grey seam. Then the writing changes. Snow thins from sentence to whisper. Gusts lose their teeth and keep only their breath. The world reappears by degrees. Hummock, rim, nest, father's pin, a line of far land. Saga lifts her head and feels the first easy air slide over her back. She stands to shake snow-free in a small, precise storm of her own, then lowers again to keep the last lesson whole. She does not spend the return of sight on something loud. She spends it on inventory. Heat, kept. Balance, kept. The idea of flight, kept and brighter. She walks the circle of together, checks the lids and commas and borders, and lets the plane finish calming. Almost there. The air hums, softer now. One more ridge. The next page will ask her to read the world after weather and choose her first road without roads. Saga closes her eyes and sleeps inside the pocket she saved, a quiet she made on purpose, and can find again. The storm loosens its hand. Lines return to the world. A hummock, a run of grass, the long, low back of the horizon. Saga stands where the wind is polite again and reads the ground the way she reads snow, by what it hides and by what it cannot help but reveal. Travel begins as a feeling before it becomes a direction. Hunger is part of it, but not all. The field that fed you yesterday hums with fewer names today. The pencil under the crust writes shorter lines, then lifts its tip. The air tastes different, as if someone stirred a cold spoon into it from far away. These are sentences a nomad learns to read. Her mother is heavy and right on the nest. Her sibling is warm punctuation pressed close. Her father draws a white line to the south and pauses, an arrow without urgency, an idea the wind underlines twice and then leaves. Saga holds that line in her chest beside another that slants east where the light seems cleaner. Two possibilities, both true. She tests the edges of the known. A low rise offers a view of a pale spread of land that has learned new shapes from the storm. Drifts have gathered into soft dunes. Troughs have broadened. The undersnow world has redrawn its streets. Saga lowers, listens, and finds the count she kept still works. But the answers live farther apart. That is a kind of map. Same rules, longer reach. A road without roads needs anchors you can carry. She chooses wind on cheek, sun on shoulder, sound on the left, and walks them in her body until they settle into a compass that fits behind the breastbone. She adds the memory of her father's pause, south, like a finger marking a page she will return to. She practices small distance first, from nest to mound, from mound to the next low line that makes the wind quiet, from there to a field whose surface reads flatter and therefore thinner. She writes these in a tidy chain, each link checked, none of them heroic. Nomads are careful before they are far. The daylight paradox remains open and necessary here. Movement must not tear the cloth she wove from patience. She moves as if she were part of the air's slow thinking, not a suggestion the plane can argue with. When she needs to be a line, she is a line. When she needs to be nothing, she remembers how to for 3 breaths, 5, then 3 again. The world forgets to keep track of her. A fox appears and vanishes into the redrawn grammar of the field. A gull rides a seam in the recovering sky. Under the snow, the pencil writes a proper paragraph at the far edge of a shallow basin. Saga marks it later. Travel is not only going, it is also choosing what not to take now, so after will have something to give. She returns to together and shares what the day allowed. Her mother's weight says, stay for now. Her father's white arrow says later for sure. Both can be true. Saga files the contradiction in the drawer where she keeps useful questions. What tells you to leave? Not the urge, but the moment. When the map inside you and the map underfoot disagree, which one gets the next word? Afternoon cleans the light. The wind turns into a slow river with predictable bends. Saga walks its bank in the air, hopping from lift to hush to lift, never far, always certain. Each certainty adds a notch to the compass she is building. She notes where the snow hardens, where it lies, where it hums. She notes where sound travels and where it is swallowed before it can speak. The notes are small and correct. Small and correct is how far begins. She rests in a pocket that breathes with her, then takes the next careful link toward the basin marked later. She does not commit. She outlines the route the way a fingertip outlines a shape on frost. Light, temporary, enough. When she returns to the nest, the outline is still visible in her body. She breathes it once so it will stay until morning. The horizon keeps its distance, but the distance is friendly now. Tomorrow may ask for more of it. Saga listens to the low words the wind saves for those who are almost ready. One ridge more, a little farther. You know the way. She does not close any question. She opens one more instead. When the skies to the south fill with northern ghosts and the road stretches beyond comfort, how do you travel in a crowd without losing your own map? She tucks that question under her wing, like a warm thing she means to keep. The day folds. Together stays whole. Readiness, again, is enough. Clear air returns in careful pieces. Saga tests them the way a mason taps a stone, listening for true. The basin she marked later waits, shallow and pale, as if the storm sketched it and forgot to color it in. She sets out by links, nest to mound, mound to hush, hush to lift, each link small and certain, none of them heroic. Her compass lives behind the breastbone now. Wind on cheek, sun on shoulder, sound on the left. She walks those anchors until they agree. When they argue, she lets the wind vote twice. The plane approves of that fairness, The air becomes easier to carry. Distance is no longer a guess. It is a rhythm. She counts lift sheets the way she once counted breaths. 1 to begin, 2 to hold, 3 to give back before one spoils the line. On the ground, drifts are tidy new paragraphs. Between them, the crust thins, tuned by the storm, into places where sound rises faster than light. At the basin's lip, the undersnow pencil writes again, short, short, long, then rests as if listening too. Saga lowers into less than notice and lets her face collect the lines until 2 points agree. Not a hunt, not yet. The lesson today is map making, where the count still works, where it changes, where a seam bends away from its usual path. She files the updates where certainty lives. Her father passes high and pauses in the south again, the same white arrow with the same lack of hurry. The idea of father taps lightly at the door. Her mother is a good gravity behind her. The nest is a warm circle she can still see when her eyes are closed. Both truths travel. She practices traveling without tearing the cloth she wove from light. In bright country, arrival has to live inside a blink. In wind country, steps must end between gusts. Today is both. She times a longer glide, so the landing happens while the air forgets to keep track of her. Even she is almost unsure she arrived. A fox writes a line at the far edge and fades into heat shimmer. A gull reads the weather higher up and edits nothing. Saga lingers on the ridge where the basin swallows sound and learns a new rule. When the world mutes, you must become quieter than your own idea of quiet, or you will be the loudest thing in it. She narrows, lowers, and the plane lets her pass through like a thought it wants to keep. She returns to together before the distance becomes boastful. Her sibling presses punctuation into her side. Her mother folds the sentence closed against a thin wind. Sharing is careful, precise. The taste reminds Saga that maps are not for map's sake. Every line she memorizes will buy a better after afternoon, cleans its glass. She walks the air again, this time past the basin and along a low run of pale ground that points east. Lemmings have redrawn their streets under there. The pencil writes bolder toward the horizon. She notes it, but does not spend it. To travel well is to save some yes for tomorrow. The daylight riddle stays open on purpose, tied now to travel. How do you move at the one breath that matters most and still wear the disguise you wove from patience? Saga tries a slow that belongs to eyes and a quick that belongs to wind and finds the seam where both are satisfied. She stands there a heartbeat and leaves before the spot decides to argue. Evening, the kind that never quite arrives, lays a blue hand on the plain. The wind becomes a clerk, counting small coins. Saga counts with it. Pocket of shelter, sheet of lift, hush, repeat, until the route home is a soft thread she can follow backward with her eyes closed. She tucks the thread where warmth lives and steps into the circle that is still the smartest word. Questions open where they should. If the far fields grow generous and northern ghosts gather, how do you travel in company without losing your own map? When the road without roads runs south for days, what tells you when to turn your face back to the long light? And when the snow keeps secrets the ears cannot solve, which truth do you trust first? The one underfoot or the one inside? She does not close any door. She opens one more. Tomorrow, test the basin's count at dawn, when the crust is honest and wind has not yet remembered its teeth. If the pencil draws bolder there, the next link will be longer. One ridge more. The air hums, pleased. Almost home, it adds, meaning the kind of home you carry. Saga folds the day the way her father folds a wing, clean, without noise. Readiness is bright and quiet inside her. The map is still being written, and she is writing it well. Dawn is a clean edge. The storm has stepped back, leaving the crust honest and the air careful. Saga climbs to the low rise that hears best and lets the field settle around her like a page. Before the lesson begins, two new questions open. When far fields thin and winter stretches south, will she fly among the northern ghosts? And how will she keep her own map inside a crowd? And when spring lengthens the light, how will she choose a partner and a bear rise to trust with eggs? Doors open. She returns to Snow's secrets. She becomes less than notice. Body level with the plane. Head a fraction low so the face fringe gathers sound. The world looks plain. It sounds interesting. Under the crust, something writes. Short, short, long. Pause, short. Saga does not translate sound into sight. She lets sound be itself and draws lines between two small agreements until they cross. Her head turns. A coordinate exists that eyes would only complicate. Count is the scaffold. 1, 2. Now. Practiced until her chest knows the interval better than hunger does. But the snow has layers, and layers lie. She listens for depth as well as direction, where the top is brittle, where the middle is damp, where the base is old enough to soften a landing. The pencil below draws, stops, draws. She waits not for the line, but for the breath that makes the line mean alive. A small rise, a test of angle, a return. The crust holds, then complains quietly. She files the complaint as a void here. She shifts a body length and feels the sound bloom. 2 points agree, then a third seals the promise. Together is strong even when you act alone. Saga rises the height of a hand and opens her wings only to steer. Gravity begins the story. She edits the middle. Primaries step the rush into nothing. Tail trims the last idea of noise. The press is short and exact. Snow gives, but not too much. Her feet find the seam where air becomes ceiling. She holds for one small heartbeat. Now, says the Count. She does not strike with speed. She strikes with agreement. The world becomes still enough to hear both breaths, the one under snow and her own. She aims not where the sound was, but where the rhythm will be. The seam yields, and her toes answer something small and warm and real. She lifts with a twist that keeps the hush intact. She does not celebrate. The lesson is the root, the count that matched, the angle that folded sound inward, the precise press that kept the crust honest, the lift that left no trace. She steps to the mound and settles into calm. The field looks unchanged. That is the point. Another pattern calls, short, long, long. Saga lowers and waits for the map to agree a second time. It does. The Pounce repeats, cleaner. A miss is quiet and useful. A success spends no extra noise. Quiet facts ride inside. The round face disc cups sound toward offset ears that measure tiny arrival differences. The skull angles the difference into direction. The feet know the seam by feel. The tail writes the comma that keeps the sentence readable. Saga does not think these facts. She is these facts. The daylight paradox remains open on purpose. This chapter is for hearing, not explaining brightness. For now, those questions hold the door for what follows. The road without roads stretching south, and the choice of partner and rise when the long light returns. She gives the morning a final proof. The pattern below repeats with the steadiness of a metronome. Saga opens into the sheet of lift, presses the seam, and lifts again with only a snow-quiet whisper to show. The learning is complete enough to carry. R3 is closed in action, not in speech. She returns to together. Sharing is careful. Warmth edits whatever the wind forgot to soften. Her sibling leans, a small, steady yes. Her father's white pin releases into a relaxed glide. Her mother's weight is permission to rest. Next comes wider rooms, traveling days stitched from lift and hush, skies that gather northern ghosts, brightness that will need its own answer, and a spring that writes courtship in low flights and offerings. The road has started, the map inside her is ready. Almost there, the air says at the seam between gusts. One more ridge. Saga closes her eyes and keeps the morning's hush bright and quiet. A tool she will use again when the world asks for both motion and silence at once. Bright returns, not the gentle pewter of stormlight. True brightness, the kind that makes edges thin and shadows forget their jobs. Saga steps onto the low rise and asks a simple question that has waited since the beginning. How does a white bird move and hunt in a world that is also white? Before the answer arrives, two paths open in front of her, the kind that will soon matter more than any one field. When far skies begin to fill with northern ghosts, how will she travel among them and still keep her own map? And when spring raises the long light, which quiet low rise will she trust with a partner and eggs? She keeps both questions warm, then turns to brightness. Color helps, but it is not the trick. Behavior is the trick. Saga lowers until her body becomes the height the grass can forgive. She narrows so the wind finds nothing to argue with. She chooses a place where the light glances off her rather than striking full on. Sun on the shoulder, not the face. Wind across the back, not under the wing. Head angle matters. A slight tuck prevents the lids from flashing a signal. A small tilt keeps glare from making her eyes speak. The plane is full of tiny shadows that do not look like shadows. A hummock throws a line. A trough gathers a cooler seam. Even a drift edge wears a grey too soft to see until you stand beside it. Saga learns to live at the borders of those differences. Close enough to borrow, not close enough to announce. She becomes the change rather than the thing changed. Stillness is not the same everywhere. In bright country, stillness must breathe without moving. She practices breathing like short cloth, small folds that do not stir the chest. When she shifts, it is inside a blink, hers or the world's. So the eye that might catch the motion is busy wetting itself. Steps are sentences, with nothing wasted. Arrive without arriving. Turn without turning. Let the air finish speaking before you add a quiet word. Her plumage helps by breaking outline, mottled marks that turn edge into noise the light cannot hold. But feathers only begin the disguise. Position completes it. With sun left, she keeps the head low and the shoulder bright. With sun right, she reverses the grammar. Crosswind asks for a lean that turns lift into a smoothing tool. Upwind asks for patience, a slow ease that lets the air make the first mistake. She chooses a field that is bright enough to be honest. Lemmings write under the crust here, not loudly, but with confidence. Saga does not stare at the place she means to use. She stares at where looking looks normal and counts quietly until the first coordinate forms in sound rather than sight. 1, 2, now, she tells her breath, and does not move. She adds the second clock, the undersnow rhythm, and waits for the rhyme. When the rhymes agree, motion belongs to certainty, not wish. Movement in brightness must not tear the cloth she spent an hour weaving. She tries the pace that belongs to light, slower than noticing. She tries the pace that belongs to wind, quick enough to catch the smooth sheet before it breaks. Between them is a seam she can walk. She steps onto it for one heartbeat, then leaves as if she were never there. A fox writes a neat line at the far edge and chooses a way. A gull etches the underside of sky and edits nothing. Saga lowers a fraction more and lets the field forget her. When the rhyme below repeats, short, long, long, she rises the height of a hand, opens not wide but correct, and lets gravity begin the story while the primaries step the rush into silence. The press is short and precise. The crust holds. The tail writes the comma that keeps the sentence legible. Her feet know the seam. The hush holds. She returns to exactly where she meant to be and becomes less again before the light can change its mind. The lesson proves itself twice more. A miss is quiet and useful. A success spends no extra sound. By midday, Saga can move in full white without breaking the cloth she wove from patience. The paradox that waited since the beginning is no longer a riddle. It is a practice she can carry. She does not say finished. She ends on purpose, so the best attempt can be tomorrow's beginning. The open roads ahead remain open. Crowds of winter travelers that may draw her far, and a spring rise where a low flight and a gift could begin another circle. Which way, when, and with whom? Those doors stay warm. Together is still the smartest word. The nest is grammar that always holds. Her mother is a steady lid. Her father draws a white line to the south and pauses. Saga files that line beside the eastern seam where sound grew bold this morning. 2 anchors, both true. The map inside her brightens without shouting. Almost there, the air says, pleased. One more ridge. Saga lets the day's answer settle into muscle and habit. Tomorrow will ask travel questions. She will bring brightness with her. The world widens. Lines that used to be borders turn into invitations. Low fields stepping east. Pale coasts that remember summer. Far flats that ring when wind touches them just right. Saga feels a new question. Live beside the old ones. When the long light returns, Who will she choose to stand with on a bare rise? And where will they trust the ground with eggs? The question stays open, warm as a small coal. Now the sky writes a different story. White shapes, spaced like commas across distance, then more shapes, then a paragraph you can read from miles away. Northern ghosts, people so when winter fills strange skies with owls that do not usually visit. Saga lifts into the slow river of air and finds others riding the same seam, young birds bright and wide-eyed, older birds traveling like punctuation between weather and food. Why do the ghosts arrive all at once? And why this far? The answer begins in a summer that was generous, an ocean of small lives under the tundra's skin, where prey is many, eggs are many, where eggs are many. Fledglings stand like pale cairns across the plain. A year like that teaches you that hunger can be solved by listening and patience, but it also builds a truth you meet later. Abundance is a tide. The tide changes. The undersnow pencil shortens its lines. Streets collapse and reroute. The math that made last year easy begins to disagree with itself. A young owl learns to read the argument. Fewer returns from the field that once sang. Rhythms that go silent for hours. Crusts that speak unhelpful lies. The map inside you redraws its arrows toward elsewhere. Elsewhere is not one place. It is 1,000 careful choices stitched into a road. You follow seam to seam, hush to lift, pocket to pocket, learning the handwriting of unfamiliar ground. Sometimes the line carries you past forests you do not use, but note. Lakes that hold their breath under ice, river mouths where wind stacks the air in chewy layers. Sometimes the line carries you over fields where mice write so loudly even the sky can read them. You step down and pay attention. More owls gather on these loud pages. Not a flock in the way geese are flocks. No tight braid, no chorus. But company. Each bird keeps its own sentence, yet the paragraph reads together. Some are crisp and spotless, new maps still drying. Some are grayer, with edges softened by years, reading the world with the easy certainty of those who have had to leave and return many times. Irruption, a human word, is simply this in an owl's body. Last year made many of you, this year will not feed all of you where you were born. So you widen the room. Youth travel far because youth can carry far. Even older birds drift when the numbers become unkind, though they know more places where kindness still happens. Saga learns how to travel in company without losing her own map. You do not follow a bird, you follow the agreement between wind and ground. You let another's pause show you a seam you missed, then test it for yourself. If the seam is true, you file it. If it is false, you let it go without complaint. The daylight cloth you learn to weave still matters here. Movement timed inside a blink. Breath that doesn't flutter, steps that don't announce. Crowds do not excuse noise, they amplify it. Some days the sky writes plenty and the plain pays in full. 3 clean counts in a single field, then rest. Some days the sky writes nothing you can use. You carry yesterday's yes forward and spend it carefully. The road without roads is not hardship if you treat it as study. Toward evening, the company thins and thickens again. as if the air itself were nodding. Saga notices that the birds who travel best are the ones who treat far as many small nears. They end early on purpose, saving the best attempt for tomorrow's beginning. She does the same. The why is clear now, not a rumor, but a structure. Many young from a good year pray that cycles like breath, winter that asks the room to stretch. The ghosts are not ghosts at all. They are ordinary lives arriving where the math became favorable. The mystery resolves into practice you can feel in bone and feather, but the new coal still glows. When the page turns from winter to spring, who and where, low passes and offerings will begin the answer. A bare rise will be chosen. The nest will become grammar again. The question opens wider as the explanation closes, and the balance satisfies. Saga settles on a fence of wind at dusk and lets the land write its last pale line underneath her. One ridge more, the air suggests, friendly as a hand. Almost home, it adds, meaning the kind you carry forward until the ground agrees to hold it. She folds her wings without noise. The company around her thins into distances she can still feel. Tomorrow's seam is already under her feet. The room is wider, the story warmer. The ghosts have names. The road keeps them. The long light lengthens. Wind grows soft-voiced. The plane exhales its winter caution. Saga follows a river of easy air toward a country that feels remembered even if her feet have not stood there before. Low rises dot the field like gentle questions. Somewhere among them is a place where a shallow scrape and patience can hold a circle of warmth. First, the sky writes a visitor. A pale shape moves low and honest, wings steady as thought. He passes with a small gift in his feet and lays it on a hummock. No hurry, no fireworks. Then he rises and draws a slow figure over the plain, a line that begins near Saga and ends where her attention sits. It is not a demand. It is an invitation drawn with air. Courtship in this country is quiet grammar, low passes that show strength without shouting, a pause on a rise that reads the wind correctly, an offering placed where the light is kind and the ground is listening. Saga answers with what matters, shape without argument, breath without flutter, a perch that says, I understand this air. She does not accept a gift because it is offered. She accepts the place because it is correct. Site choice is an education in small truths. She steps each rise and asks the ground for its stories. Is the moss warm under sun or only pretending? Does wind spend itself on the far side, leaving a pocket that breathes with her? Do the near lines give a clean view in all directions? Or do they hide a fox road with tidy punctuation she should not ignore? She listens for the undersnow pencil, loud enough to feed, not so loud that the nest hums like a market. A good rise is barely higher than its neighbors, and exactly kinder. She tests the crust at noon and at not quite night, because some places speak the truth only at certain hours. She places her body on the bare ground and turns a slow circle, measuring which shoulder the sun prefers and whether the wind kisses or pulls. When she stands, she leaves a shallow thought in the soil. Later, that thought will become a scrape. The pale visitor returns, same patience, new proof. He sets a second gift where the air agrees with it, no closer than respect prefers, no farther than meaning can travel. He does not look away while not staring. When he lifts, he shows the honest work of flying, low, sure, ready to fetch and carry when the circle needs it. Saga files the line of his pass next to the line of the wind. Both are useful. She keeps questions open on purpose. If this rise is right in calm, is it right in weather? If the fox is only punctuation today, what word might it write tomorrow? If abundance runs loud now, will it wander thin when the chicks need most? She will not close any of these before the ground answers twice. The scrape itself is simple, a shallow bowl of pressed plant and feather, patient and low. She turns, presses, turns again, shaping warmth into a place the wind will treat as a story worth keeping. The work edits her breathing down to calm. The air seems pleased by this economy. He brings another offering and stands downwind like a white pin set to keep the weather respectful. He does not choose for her. He chooses to prove he can carry. She answers by remaining, 1, 2, 3, on the rise that has told the best truths, then leaving, then returning to see if the same truths hold after distance. By evening, the rise passes its last quiet test. The world can look in without intruding. The horizon can be read without standing. The undersnow pencil writes a steady paragraph within easy reach, and a smaller, quieter paragraph a short flight away. She presses the bowl a shade deeper. The place accepts the promise. What remains open is exactly what should, with whom to seal the circle, when to set the first round shell against earth, how to balance stillness with the work of keeping heat. She keeps those doors warm. The pale visitor lands nearby and does not cross the line the wind has drawn around her. That is an answer too. Almost there, the plane suggests, the way a friend speaks from one ridge ahead. One more ridge. Saga settles her weight into the bowl and lets the long light rest on her back. Tomorrow, gifts will matter differently. Soon, the nest will be grammar again. The long light returns like a promise kept. Shadows thin to polite threads. The wind trades iron for linen. Saga settles on the shallow bowl she pressed into the rise and lets her weight mean stay. The ground answers by holding steady beneath her. Far off, the plane writes soft paragraphs of sound. Under the crust, the pencil of life is busy again. He arrives low and honest, a pale line stitched across easy air. In his feet, a gift, not a flourish, proof. He lays it downwind, just outside the circle the breeze has drawn around her, and waits without staring, strength without shouting. Saga remains a count longer than yesterday. The wind approves. The first egg is warm in the world before anyone sees it. Saga shapes the bowl tighter with her body and folds herself into the small gravity of beginning. Heat is grammar now, feather to shell, breast to breath. She edits the wind out and the warmth in. When she stands to turn the egg, it is a short, careful verb that leaves no extra mark. He takes the world's errands, low passes, correct pauses, deliveries that arrive with the precise humility of enough. If wind is cross, he chooses a seam it respects. If light is too loud, he becomes less until the field forgets him. He does not waste speed where stillness will suffice. He does not spend stillness where a quiet glide will serve better. When danger sketches a line at the edge of the field, he becomes punctuation that turns the sentence away. The second egg arrives as if time had been measured inside her. Some nests write a third. On high years, a fourth finds room. Saga turns each in turn, a slow wheel of care. The bowl is a climate she tends without drama. Down becomes richer near her breast. Outer feathers guard against a wind that still remembers winter's voice. The long light helps and complicates. It gives her hours without hurry, but few shadows to steal, so behavior must be the disguise. Small is still smarter than strong. She tucks until her outline is exactly what the rise can forgive. When she must stand, she stands in the blink between gusts, so the field forgets the motion as soon as it happens. He proves distance by returning from it. Sometimes the proof is thin, and then not thin. The plain is an honest book. On days when prey lines write loudly, he brings 2 small sentences in a row and leaves them with the care of someone who knows what heat costs. On leaner days, he brings 1 and stays downwind a count longer, making the air into a wall between the circle and the world. The rise keeps speaking truths that nests should tell. Wind spends itself on the far side and leaves a breathing pocket. Sound travels cleanly in 4 directions. Fox punctuation appears, then edits itself into elsewhere. Gulls write remarks that mean nothing close to the ground. At noon, the bowl is warm without glare. At not quite night, it is quiet without being hidden. Saga tests these sentences twice a day and keeps them if they repeat. Under the crust, streets change with weather and taste. She listens with her face while staying, measuring whether the near field will sing loudly enough when small mouths arrive. The answer is not a number. It is a pattern her chest recognizes. Short, short, long. Pause, short. Close enough. A quieter paragraph lives 1 short glide away. She files it as later. Questions open where they should. When a shadow writes itself too close, does she hold or lift? If a day runs thin, does he push for a farther seam or feed the circle sooner and rest? When the first egg cracks, does she announce, or does she let the sound of breathing be the only news? These doors stay warm and useful. She turns the eggs again, a measured, gentle quarter. The shells shine with a clean dullness that means the climate is right. She settles and lets the long light paint her back the color of trust. He stands as a white pin just beyond sight, a border set where weather will go around. Together is grammar again. Her heat, his road, the bowl's patience. A cloud shoulder gathers and wanders off without deciding. The plain sighs. Saga listens to the near ground and feels the smallest tremor answer under the shell. Not yet a tap, only a rumor. Soon, breath will become a voice, then hunger, then the need for a different kind of stillness, the kind that lets tiny heads find what they are looking for. She does not hurry the day toward that sound. She tends warmth and lets time do its work. The road without roads is quiet for now, folded under the nest like a map waiting for small feet. When she closes her eyes, her body keeps the count it learned. 1 to look, 2 to listen, 3 to decide, 4 to do the smallest correct thing. Almost there, the air says from the edge of the rise. One more ridge. Saga breathes into the bowl and keeps the circle whole, knowing the next page is a crack of light and the first true calls. The storm season is behind them, but still inside the air like a memory. Saga faces the low horizon and reads the ground as if it were a page she once wrote on and is now rereading for truth. Travel begins as anchors she can carry. Wind on cheek, sun on shoulder, sound on the left. She walks those anchors until they agree, then lets the world decide the next small yes. She does not go far, all at once. She stitches lift to hush to lift, short floats that end on purpose, so tomorrow will have somewhere better to begin. The road without roads is many careful nears. Hummocks become commas, shallow basins become paragraphs. A pale ridge is the line break where she breathes, measures, and moves again. Sometimes the undersnow pencil writes loudly, and the map says linger. Sometimes it writes only dots, and the map says learn and leave. She files each lesson where certainty lives. The compass behind her breastbone brightens without shouting. Quiet science rides inside her practice. Snowy owls steer by wind lines, landform, and prey gradients. When summer returns, many retrace broad corridors to high country where lemmings stitch louder roads under the crust. Females will do most of the sitting later. Males will carry most of the errands then. For now the lesson is distance. Add it slowly, spend it wisely. The plane gives her a day of easy air. She uses it like a savings, not a prize, crossing to country that feels remembered, even if her feet have not stood there before. The sky is wide and kind. The light is honest. She keeps the daylight cloth intact, steps inside, blinks, breath like short cloth, motion that lives between gusts. To those who are not listening, she is hardly moving at all. Toward evening, a pale line travels low and correct across the wind. Not a crowd, one bird, unhurried. He threads the seam with workman's certainty, pauses near a shallow rise, and leaves with the same measured quiet. Later, he passes again with something small carried level, sets it downwind of the rise, as if placing a proof, and lifts. He does not cross the soft boundary the air has drawn around her. He reads the wind as if the wind had taught him personally. Saga does not answer with flourish. She answers with correctness, lowers until her outline is exactly what the rise can forgive, breathes without flutter, and lets the pocket of loose air show it can keep a promise. She tests the view in 4 directions, not standing to do it. She listens to the near field and the far one, measuring whether the pencil writes boldly enough here for the circle that may come. The map inside and the map underfoot agree by small degrees. She moves a body length, and the agreement holds. She moves a wing's width and finds the same answer. Return is not a single arrow. It is a series of repeating truths. The wind spends itself on the far side. Sound travels clean. The ground lets warmth pool in the shallow bowl of a turn. R5 closes without ceremony. No banner, just fluency. She can leave a place that fed her yesterday and find another that will feed her tomorrow. And the road between them can be carried behind the breastbone. The lesson is complete enough to be quiet, but the next door opens before this one shuts, as it should. If this Rise is honest in calm. Will it be honest in weather? If gifts arrive downwind with patience, is patience enough to trust? Who will stand with her when the long light stretches thin and small breaths are counting on bigger ones? She files those questions where warmth will keep them ready. The pale line travels his seam again. Not closer, not careless, simply correct. Saga lets the day end before desire edits something simple into something loud. The horizon finishes gold, and then thinks better of it. She steps into together with the memory of the road folded small under her breast. Almost there, the air suggests from one ridge ahead. One more ridge. Saga closes her eyes and lets the map rest. Not erased, only carried. Knowing the next page is low flights and offerings drawn in wind and patience. The long light makes time feel wider, as if the day had opened a quiet door and asked us to step through without hurry. Saga stays on the chosen rise and lets the wind draw a soft circle around her, an invisible boundary polite birds do not cross. He arrives the correct way, low over the grass, wings steady as good handwriting, no flourish. He lets the air do half the work, then sets a small gift downwind of the circle and waits without staring. Strength, edited. Saga answers with right shape, right breath. Head slightly lowered so lids do not flash. Chest level to the breeze so sound will not catch. Outline exactly the height the rise can forgive. Courtship here is a grammar of small proofs. In the air, he offers short skylines. Lift, pause, shallow swoop, ending each before want can make it noisy. On the ground, he foot offers prey and bobs once. Not because bobbing is fancy, but because it keeps the wind honest between them. If she steps, he steps back a pace, respecting the circle the air has drawn. The conversation repeats across days until the wind begins to treat them as one sentence. They test the rise, the way nests must be tested. Morning. Does warmth gather without glare? Midday. Does the pocket breathe when gusts arrive in sets? Almost night. Can sound travel cleanly in every direction, so fox becomes a sentence that can be read early. Saga turns, presses, turns again, shaping a shallow bowl that is mostly patience. He reads the near field and the farther paragraph, returning with enough rather than impressive, which is the better kind of proof. Light facts ride quietly inside the story. Snowy owls ground nest in open country. The female will sit deepest while the male provisions and guards. Clutch size rises and falls with the year's prey math. The work ahead is simple and exacting. Heat held for nearly a month. Eggs turned with small verbs. Deliveries that arrive low and correct, so the air, not the nest, carries the news. On a day the wind behaves, he draws a longer figure, climbing into the breeze and stalling just enough to show control, then sliding down as softly as someone smoothing a page. He never cuts across her shadow. He never lands inside the circle. Respect keeps weather on your side. Saga keeps questions open on purpose. Is this pocket honest in weather as well as calm? Will the near field sing loudly enough when small mouths arrive? When a shadow writes itself too close? Is the first answer more lid or lift and turn? Questions are doors, She keeps them warm rather than shut. They choose together without announcing it. He brings proof at regular hours and waits the same respectful distance each time. She remains a breath longer on the bowl after each turn, as if the ground and her weight had learned each other's names. When she stands in the blink between gusts. When she settles as if the wind had suggested it first. Evening, the kind that never fully arrives, lays silver over the grass. The rise speaks the last truth she needs. Sound carries evenly, the pocket breathes. The horizon can be read without standing. Saga presses the bowl a shade deeper. He sets one more small gift, where the air agrees with it and lifts with no spare feather out of place. We do not close any door tonight. We open one more. The first round shell will belong to rhythm, not wish. Heat will become grammar again. A name waits like a kept promise, Solace. But it is a promise for later, when breath becomes a voice. The chapter ends where it should, not with a flourish, but with correctness. He is a white pin at the edge of sight. She is the lid that keeps the pocket true. The wind speaks in its familiar encouragement from one ridge ahead. Almost there. Saga answers by staying, because sometimes staying is the motion that matters most, and the next page knows it. The long light stretches, and the rise keeps its promise. Saga lowers into the shallow bowl she pressed from patience and breath. Heat becomes grammar again, breast to shell, feather to wind, stillness that edits weather out of the circle. When she stands, it is a short verb with no draft. When she settles, it is as if the air suggested it first. The first egg arrives the way correct things often do, quietly, perfectly placed. Its surface is a clean dullness, not to shine but to keep. Saga turns it with small, exact motions, a quarter here, a half there, keeping the inner world honest. The bowl breathes with her, the pocket of easy air holds. Later, a second egg will follow after a pause of days, and perhaps a third if the field keeps singing. In generous years, more. In lean years, fewer. Rhythm over wish. He writes the errands of the world. Low passes, measured pauses, deliveries that arrive enough, not impressive. He sets each offering downwind of the circle and waits without staring. If a gust becomes a sentence with sharp letters, he is a white pin that asks it to go around. If a fox drafts punctuation at the rim of sight, he stands wrong for foxes and right for weather until the line edits itself into elsewhere. Light science rides inside the quiet work. Snowy owls nest on open ground. The female does nearly all incubation, turning the eggs and brooding deeply at first. Incubation takes about a month. Eggs are laid a couple of days apart, so hatching will be staggered. A ladder of needs the circle can climb. In the earliest days, the bowl must be a climate, not a place. Later, shade and vigilance will share the job. Saga measures the rise at honest hours. Noon. Does warmth gather without glare? Almost night. Does sound travel evenly so the world can be read while she stays low? After a light wind, she checks that the pocket still breathes. After a quiet hour, that the pocket still exists. The ground answers the same way twice. She keeps the answer. The daylight cloth still matters. In bright country, motion must live inside a blink. Arriving should look like not arriving. When she must stand, she stands between gusts, so the field forgets the movement as soon as it happens. When she settles as if nothing changed at all. Only the smallest correction, the kind the wind respects. Miles away, the undersnow pencil redraws its streets with weather and taste. Near the rise, it writes confidently enough to believe in beginnings. Saga listens with the circle of her face while staying. Short, short, long. Pause, short. That is a map for later, not now. Now is heat held, and small verbs repeated until time does its work. He proves distance by returning from it. On loud afternoons he brings 2 neat sentences in a row. On thinner ones, 1 clean line, and a longer watch downwind so the air, not the nest, carries the news. He wastes nothing. No speed where stillness will do. No stillness where a quiet glide will serve better. The errands make a road that never touches the bowl. Inside the shell, something begins to remember how to be here. Not a tap yet, only the rumor of a tap, a soft thought against the wall. Saga keeps the count she learned in open country and now uses for keeping. 1 to look, 2 to listen, 3 to decide, 4 to do the smallest correct thing. Turn, settle, breathe, repeat. The circle stays whole because repetition is a kind of love. Questions stay open on purpose. If a grey day returns with hard letters, does she hold lower or trade this pocket for the next? If the near field thins for a week, does he range farther and come back larger, or return sooner and return twice? When the first pip appears and the breath asks for help, how long should patience be before the tiny door is ready to open itself? Evening, if this place can be said to have evening, lays a silver thought across the grass. The egg warms under her. The rise makes no argument. The wind keeps its side of the bargain. He is a white border at the edge of sight, correct and present. Together, the sentence reads, "We do not rush the shell to break. We open the next page instead, feeding the future, where a first voice, then 2, will turn the bowl into a soft, bright chorus, and where small eyes will learn by watching how quiet becomes food and how a line of air can lift you exactly as high as you can keep." The wind gives its familiar encouragement from 1 ridge ahead. Almost there. Saga answers by staying, because staying is the motion that matters most tonight, and warmth is the story the air needs her to tell. The first sound is small as a fingertip on paper. A line appears inside the shell, pauses, returns from a new angle. Saga turns the egg a slow quarter and warms the hinge she knows is forming. The room inside learns to breathe. The room outside keeps the weather out. When the pip opens, it opens like morning. Gradual, correct. A wet head arrives, then a soft question shaped like a voice. Saga lowers in a sheltering curve, offering heat first, taste second. The second egg listens to this new grammar and begins its sentence a day later. A third may follow if the field keeps singing. Staggered beginnings build a ladder of needs the circle can climb. We name the first chick Solace. The name is light enough to carry and true enough to keep. Solace sleeps against Saga's breast, waking when the circle asks for a new syllable. The sound is small. Here. He rights the errands low and right, lands downwind, sets enough within reach, lets the air carry the news. On loud afternoons, he brings twice, on thinner evenings once, standing a count longer so the breeze becomes a wall. Learning begins in the oldest classroom. Solace watches before trying. The eye is a pocket that holds a method until the body can use it. Saga shows how stillness becomes food, how to face the wind so feathers lie smooth and sound enters clean, how to listen for a line under snow and wait for the second point that turns it into a place. She does not lecture. She is the lesson. Days become a sequence of small verbs. Brew deep when the air remembers winter. Shade when the sun is loud. Turn each egg. Feed each beak. Tidy wind from the bowl. Solace grows from wet brightness to proper down, then to quills that point at tomorrow. Legs learn to stand before wings learn to hold. Balance arrives in sections. By 3 weeks the bowl cannot hold the whole story. Solace becomes a walker, stepping out on cautious feet, while Saga stays near as lid and compass. The ground is a page with wider letters now, hummock, trough, hush. He sees the low mound and understands it as a classroom he has already visited in dreams. He studies by watching. When Saga lowers into less than notice, he lowers his idea of tall. When she turns her head to fix the 2 points of a hidden sound, he learns the shape of that angle and what patience feels like, while numbers in the chest say 1, 2, now. When a gust tests the edge of her wing, he sees how softening makes the wind forget. The body records each answer and waits for a day to spend it. First flights will wait 7 or 8 weeks, but first floats happen sooner. Small lifts that end before they begin, the ground returning him to itself with calm authority. Saga ends each attempt early on purpose, so tomorrow has a better beginning. He is fed at the landing either way. The circle rewards study as much as success. Quiet facts, both guard. She still shades and edits heat. He ranges wider and returns with proof. If the near field thins, he stitches lift to hush to lift. If a fox appears, 2 white commas become a full stop. Questions stay open. How far will Solace travel when winter stretches south and the plain asks for company? Which rise will one day answer his wait with the same steady yes? When the map underfoot and the map inside disagree, whose voice will he trust first? Evening lays a warm hand over the rise. Solace sleeps where Saga's breath is a roof. The second chick stirs in its shell. The bowl keeps its climate. He stands downwind, a white pin, asking whether to go around. Together is still the smartest word. We do not rush the next lesson. We open one more door instead, a gentler season ahead, where first true flight will belong to certainty, and where endings are only places the road turns. Almost there, the air suggests from one ridge ahead. Saga stays. Solace dreams the shape of lift he has not used yet, and the plane accepts both answers with grace. The plane exhales a softer season. Grass rises where snow had the last word. Water loosens its vowels and runs. Saga stands on the familiar rise and reads the air the way an elder reads a much-loved page. slowly, with nothing to prove. Her edges are softer now. The bright marks that once shouted youth have faded into quiet grammar. Strength remains, edited to essentials. Solace is taller than yesterday and truer than hope. He holds the low mound the way a promise holds breath. The first real float becomes a quiet flight. Nothing loud, nothing borrowed. A clean carried that lasts as long as certainty, and not one heartbeat more. He lands where he meant to. Saga does not call out triumph. She lets the landing teach itself. He tries again and gives the moment back early, on purpose, the way he learned. Days braid themselves from ordinary gold. He watches, then does. When Saga lowers into less than notice, Solace becomes smaller than his idea of small, and the wind forgets to keep track of him. When she turns her head, and the circle of her face gathers a hidden line beneath the crust, he learns the angle and the patience that lives between 1 and 2. When a curl of air scolds the edge of her wing, he softens. The curl loses interest. The road is inside him now. Provisioning lightens. He, the white pin downwind, ranges a little less far. Solace takes small errands for himself, then larger ones. The bowl is still a climate, but its borders widen into a room. On a generous day, they stand in a loose triangle of yes. The rise, the near field, the low mound. Saga sits a little deeper on the rise and lets the 2 points prove the third. Quiet science keeps company without interrupting. Juveniles learn by watching and by practice. First strong flights follow first walkers by a few weeks. Independence comes quickly because summer is short and the room must be crossed before it changes its furniture. The plane has always taught. Today, it teaches legacy. Evenings tilt earlier by a hand's width. Light drapes itself in longer sentences. Saga climbs once to the hummock that pretends to be a cliff and lets the breeze lift her exactly as high as she can keep. She holds, then returns, as if finishing a paragraph where every line already knew its ending. Solace mirrors the motion from the mound. Open, carry, close, and lands with the small apology good landings always make. He glances once at her, and then at the wind, as if to say he knows who taught the air to be useful. One night arrives sideways, the way nights do here, the sky thinking about darkness without insisting. The wind has no teeth, only breath. Solace sleeps where Saga's warmth used to be. The white pin keeps a border at a respectful distance. Saga settles into the shallow bowl that began as a scrape and became a household. She shapes herself to the pocket that has held so many correct hours and lets her breath become very even. Passing is not a storm. It is a tide that stops returning. The last lesson she offers is stillness done completely. No announcement, no sharp edge, only breath that slows, warmth that spills into the bowl, weight that says stay one final time, and then does not need to say it. The plane keeps the quiet she made. The air, polite, does not yet turn the page. Morning is silver and kind. Solace wakes into a room that feels both smaller and larger. He stands on the rim with the exactness she loved and waits until the wind tells him what kind of day it intends. He listens the way she showed him, 2 points, then a third, and the ground earns a coordinate only he can read. The white pin moves closer, not to crowd, but to draw a border the weather will go around. Together changes shape and still means what it has always meant. They give the rise its due. Solace faces the breeze and keeps his edges honest. He makes the first flight of the new household, clean, correct, no extra sound, and returns to the mark as if the world had expected it. He carries a small proof and sets it downwind of the circle. The air remembers this grammar and approves. The road without roads opens in front of him the way it opened for her. Hummocks are commas again, basins, paragraphs, the low ridge, a line break where you breathe and measure and move. He knows to end before the best attempt, so the best attempt can be tomorrow's beginning. He knows less is often warmer, and slow is many speeds depending on the company you keep. Light wind, eyes. In time the season will ask him to widen the room. Far fields will thin or sing. The sky will gather pale travelers or not. He will decide when to leave a place that fed him yesterday and how to return to a rise that tells the truth twice. He will name another pocket of air home and keep it by doing the smallest correct thing again and again until it holds. We close our eyes with him at the mound and let the plain speak in the quiet voices it saves for those who are ready. The map behind his breastbone is bright without shouting. The hush he learned from Saga is a tool he can find even in weather. The long light writes the last line the same way it writes the first. Gently, almost there, the air murmurs from one ridge ahead. One more ridge. Solace answers by rising the height of a hand, opening correct, and letting the day carry him exactly as far as certainty and no farther. The world returns him to the mark, and the mark is true. The plane holds 2 names now. Saga, who taught the wind its manners, and Solace, who remembers. The map she carried behind her breastbone, lift stitched to hush, patience folded into warmth, lives on where his wings open correct, no louder than the day requires. In one circle the world learned her silence, in the next it hears his. The rise stays honest, the road without roads keeps offering its small, certain yes. If you listen, you can still hear both voices in the long light, one that finishes a paragraph, one that begins it. The story does not end. It continues, softly, the way good weather returns. Thank you for listening and learning with us. If this story of Saga and Solace helped you rest, or just made the world feel a little wider, please tap like, subscribe, and share it with someone who loves quiet adventures. Your support helps us make more gentle, educational journeys like this one. Sleep well, travel kindly, and we'll meet you on the next ridge.